Thank you for joining the PhUSE Computational Science webinar. Today's webinar, we will focus on the upcoming 2015 Computational Science Symposium, which is now just less than a month away. And we have co-leads from each of our working groups that are going to give you a synopsis of the activities that they're going to be engaging on at that meeting. I will first start by providing an overview of the symposium and an introduction to a few of the new sessions that we'll be having. In addition, each of the working group co-leads will be providing an overview, as I mentioned before. If you are already registered for the CSS, this webinar should allow you to start prepping so you can maximize your time and determine what group you'd be interested in participating in. If you have not registered for the Computational Science Symposium, only a few slots are left, so I suggest you register soon and you reserve your spot, as we will reach capacity very soon. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping activities. Questions will be answered at the end of the session. If you have a question, please type it in the question or chat functionality of the GoToWebinar interface. Please feel free to enter your questions at any time during the webinar, and they will be addressed at the end. If we run out of time to answer the question, we'll take it back and we'll post it on the PhUSE website when we post the recording of the webinar. I'm now going to turn over to my presentation on an overview of the webinar of the upcoming Computational Science Symposium. So what I want to go over is the whole computational science collaboration and the associated working groups and what we're going to be doing at this upcoming meeting. For those that have seen or attended a webinar over the last 6 to 9 months, you've probably seen this before, so my apologies for the going over it again. But for those that are new to this initiative, I wanted to make sure I went through and covered and gave you some background. So what is PhUSE? PhUSE is a pharmaceutical user software exchange, a global organization that provides a platform for creating and sharing ideas, implementing tools and standards, and exploring innovative methods and technologies. We have over close to 4,000 members worldwide, and with over 15 to 16 events each year in the form of annual events, the Computational Science Symposium, and single-day events throughout the U.S. And Europe. So I want to talk a little bit about the paradigm shift and what led to the collaboration, which I'm going to explain to you, and the Computational Science Symposium. In the past, it's been an environment where industry sits at tables at a conference and asks questions of the FDA. It's been a very one-sided communication. And what the FDA and industry is much more interested in doing is gathering people together around a table to address issues, look at innovative solutions for problems that we have in bringing products to market. So the idea is to bring people like FDA and pharma and vendors and standards development organizations, CROs, and other people who play a part in this process and try to put the puzzle pieces together and find solutions. So the overall, and I won't read this whole text to you, but the overall idea of the computational science collaboration is to bring people together to provide and the keywords here are transparent and non-competitive environment to support, to use computational science to support product development. So the idea is a very simple model that we have. We have the computational science collaboration, and that entails sort of two buckets. The first is the working groups, and I'll talk about those in a minute, but we have a number of working groups, and within each of those working groups we have projects, focused areas that people work on to try to bring forward best practices, solutions, innovative ideas. And then we have the symposium, so that's the once-a-year event that we hold in March. It's upcoming in a month, where the working groups get back together. We have updates from the FDA, updates from the working groups, and the groups continue to work on activities throughout that meeting and plan for the next year. So we now have 5 working groups, and we have a steering committee. So our steering committee sits in the middle, and it's made up of 4 FDA members, 4 from industry, and then a liaison from each of the working groups. So their goal is to provide oversight for the entire collaboration, make sure working groups are aligned, make sure we're aligned with other organizations about activities that are ongoing. We have 5 working groups. The first is optimizing the use of data standards. So we have a very close, tight collaboration and relationship with CDISC. CDISC focuses on that development of standards, and this work-specific working group is really focused on the implementation of those standards and looking at best practices and maybe some challenges and gaps in trying to implement and use these tools. Emerging technology, this is an incubator group that was began a couple years ago that's looking at new things, new ideas, new technologies. And it's sort of, as I mentioned, they use the word incubator, the ability to sort of explore new ideas. And so they'll be doing a lot of discussion at the conference about some new ideas, and I won't spoil the future slides here. The standard scripts for reporting and analysis is really focused on developing standard scripts that we might use for some of our standard types of analyses that we do in the industry and come to an alignment on those. Non-clinical roadmap and implementation is focused on the non-clinical space and the data and the implementation best practices around that area. And then the semantic technology, which actually came out of the emerging technologies group a few years ago, is really focused on how to use semantic technology and new ways of looking at metadata to map out different areas of the clinical trial process. So we have a dashboard, and I won't show this for now, so I make sure I give the other audience time to speak, but we do have a dashboard out on the PhUSE website that talks about these working groups. We have one that has deliverables under review, so there's a number of working groups, projects within working groups that have put out deliverables, and they're under review. And then we have a catalog of all our deliverables that have been produced to date. Our best practices, our white papers, our study data reviewers guide, and other activities and deliverables that the groups have undergone. If you want to get involved, we have a PhUSE wiki out there that has information about the different working groups, including contact information, mailing lists, and other ways of getting in touch with the working groups to see how you can help and support teams. Come to the event in March. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We do need help with our technical team, so as we collaborate, collaboration needs tools, wiki support, some of our collaboration tools, distribution lists. So if you're interested in helping out on that front, we could use some help there. So the meeting is coming up on March the 15th through the 17th in Silver Spring, Maryland. So I again encourage people to attend, and I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of that meeting. To go over the agenda, on Sunday, March the 15th, we'll have registration, and then we'll have a meet and greet with the working groups where people can come in an informal way, get an introduction to the working group, the projects within it, meet some of the members, talk about the activities they've been going on in those working groups, and just to kind of come up to speed so that come Monday, you're ready to jump in and get to work. On Monday, we'll have a welcome and an FDA State of the Union, and I'll expand on that in just a minute. We will then break out into our working groups throughout the rest of Monday and into Tuesday. We'll also have a poster event on Monday. We have a record number of posters, around 35 posters, half of which are coming from the FDA. So there's a lot of good information that will be communicated in that session. And then our scriptathon. This is something we initiated last year. Over 25 people showed up and to develop and kind of, they do this in other industries, so it was an interesting idea to bring people together and sort of just see how much, code and scripts you could bang out in 4 hours. On Tuesday, we'll continue to have the working group breakout sessions up until right after lunch. We'll then have a wrap-up and a poster presentation, and we'll end with an FDA panel where we'll really focus on the guidance that was released in December and its impact on submissions. So talk a little bit about the State of the Union. Steve Wilson will talk about the Computational Science Symposium and how collaboration is important. Lillian Rosario will talk about the Jumpstart program at the FDA and that review process and how they're leveraging it. We'll then have a couple of reviewers actually get up and talk about how they're actually using this on their day-to-day work. And then we'll close with a summary of the working group successes and projects moving forward. A couple of additional things around the guidance, and I'm sure I'm probably stealing a little bit of DJ's thunder, but just wanted to mention these and then he can talk about them as well. We will have a roundtable discussion on Monday during lunch that will, an informal kind of tables where we'll have groups of people get together and sort of talk about it. and we'll have some facilitation of those discussions. And then on Tuesday, as I mentioned, Ron Fitzmartin from the FDA will help by giving a short presentation, and then we'll have a panel of Q&A on that area, because we know that's a fairly important topic for folks. So I'm not going to go through all of these again because I think the working groups are going to cover some of this, but these are just some of the things ongoing across the working groups. Development of a data standardization plan in the Optimizing Data Standards group, SEND implementation user group that is thriving within the non-clinical roadmap, the semantics technology, which is looking at representing protocol models in a much more robust way, standard scripts, updates on the PhUSE code repository and other activities. An emerging technology group, they have a number of new ideas that came out of some roundtables back in the fall, which they're looking to move forward, and they'll talk about within this session. Mentioned March 15th, we only have 300 attendees that we can allow based on the facilities. We only have a few spots left, so I would suggest people register now, because we will run up against not being allowed to have people come. As I mentioned, we have close to 35 presentations on the poster side, so that should be a very good and lively discussion. And you can stay the week. The CSS Interchange has planned their meeting for right after the CSS event, so the information and the communication that's leveraged in the CSS can be carried over to the very specific conversations around the CSS standards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our first speaker today. Let me just bear with me for a minute. We're going to jump ahead to Sue DeHaven, who's going to talk to you about the work being done in the non-clinical roadmap and implementation group. So Sue, I'm going to hand this off to you.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you everything that I want to tell you about the non-clinical group, and that will take probably an hour and a half. I know Chris won't allow that, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we do. This is mainly our informal name. We consider ourselves a non-clinical group. It's the Roadmap and Implementation Group, and I co-lead that group with Bob Dorsum from FDA. This is an extension, really, of the PhUSE mission for our collaboration, which is to improve the non-clinical assessments and regulatory science. We follow, I think, a similar process as a lot of the other groups, where we try to identify key needs and challenges, and then figure out how we can address that in a collaborative manner that's going to benefit both on the FDA side, the reviewer situation, and then also for users of the data or beneficiaries of the data. We use various different informatics approaches, and we rely heavily on the use of SEND. We want to use it. A lot of our members are from the SEND core team and non-clinical users who are expected to implement this guidance. This is a little bit of a fun slide of a word cloud that I made from the text on our front page of our wiki. And you can see here we focus a lot on data and SEND, the standard for exchange of non-clinical data. Some of the topics we think about, we have a robust group of projects within our working group, people working on the challenges of generating SEND data sets from studies that have multiple sites of data generation, for example. We have weighed in and published white paper to talk about where we think new standards are needed from a non-clinical perspective and the priority of those. As Chris mentioned, the SEND implementation working group, user group rather, is a strong force on our wiki and is a great resource. And the list goes on. We are developing really tools to help people implement SEND and to help that investment leverage the use of that data for other purposes that scientists might think of. For 2015 CSS this year, we've really come to the end point on a lot of projects we've started over the last 3 years. We've closed some and opened some, and we're at the point now where we're ready to pull for a whole new set of projects. We've already surveyed our mailing list, and come up with 4 different categories of projects that we will be investigating more deeply at the CSS to determine exactly what projects we'll do and resource. The categories around, if I can remember them, were around data quality, implementation of the standards, validation topics, and data visualization, which I think is going to be a hot one. We'll utilize our day 1 breakouts. We'll have opening remarks from Tim Kropp from FDA, who's essentially our sponsor. He and Lillian have been terrifically supportive of our group, and we really appreciate Tim visiting us. He's going to give a bit of information from a webinar that he did, I guess maybe a month or 2 ago, and talk about what kind of areas of that he's thinking for collaboration and challenges to utilizing data more strongly. And we'll have some Q&A. That'll be the beginning of our breakouts. Then we will have a 3-minute fast session for each project team to get up and give their 3-minute highlights of their projects from 2015. And then we'll break into our new project candidate list. We'll break into group discussions to vet those proposals and just derive a best of list on Monday. Tuesday, we'll dig deeper into prioritizing, select those projects, and start team building. In some cases, we do expect some of our existing projects to be ongoing, and we want to assess the resourcing of those, particularly the Send Implementation User Group is an ongoing project that we maintain, and we don't expect to close that and make sure that's resourced well. And then we'll have some team time to get our feet on the ground for our planning for 2015 to 2016. We'll have a report out on that, taking some notes to develop the accomplishment presentation that I just saw Chris had on the agenda for the end of the meeting. So we'll need to be ready for that, and talk about our communication plan for the coming year. We do have a core team that meets about monthly, and in addition, our project teams meet fairly regularly on a biweekly basis, and we have a full team meeting 2 or 3 times a year to review our project status. And our full team right now is about 110 people, I believe, and we're always looking for more. As Chris mentioned, it's a great time to join us, to come to the CSS or join us virtually. We have a lot of people from all around the world, and we do manage time zones fairly well. We have 6 posters of the 35 being presented at the CSS meeting, and in the slide deck here you have some links to our specific wiki site, and also ways to contact us if you would like to join. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you there.
Thank you, Sue. And next
Sure,
time I'll try to give you the hour and a half.
Thank you.
If you could right-click on my name, Sue, and just hand it back to me.
Yeah. There you go. Voila.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sue, for that overview. I'm going to actually go back to the Emerging Trends and Technologies group. My apologies. In trying to get organized, I realized that it was actually Dave Handelsman, the other co-lead, who'll be presenting today instead of Jeff Lowe. So I'm going to hand it off to Dave and make him a presenter. And Dave, are you there and able to talk?
I can talk. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, and
so
can you see a slide?
I can see a slide, so I think you're good to go.
All right, thanks very much. Sorry for a little bit of the confusion there, but let's jump right into what's on store for the PhUSE Emerging Technologies group coming up for the meeting. Is also a little brief update on where we are today. So in 2014, up until now, there have been 2 main projects within the Emerging Technologies group. They've been focused on cloud adoption and metadata management. I don't plan on spending a great deal of time on that today, really, because I think that's going to be a big portion of the meeting in a few weeks' time, to talk about the progress that's been made. But the point here is that we've been looking at these two projects and developing some more thorough understanding about what it means to adopt cloud technology in the clinical research industries, how to get there, how to lower those barriers, especially when you consider things like validation and other very industry-specific activities that have to be addressed. Similarly, on the metadata management side, it's really around defining our terms and what we're looking to accomplish around metadata management within the industry. And as Chris said at the beginning of the presentation, or the beginning of this section anyway, the goal of emerging technologies is somewhat to serve as an incubator. It's for new projects, new technologies, areas where there's a lot of conversation but not necessarily a lot of agreement around what some of these terms mean and what some of the best paths forward could be. And in some ways, we look to graduate projects to maybe standalone streams in and of themselves. So we've got these two topics that have been, or these two projects that have been part of the 2014 schedule. Those will continue at the meeting. There'll be updates in terms of the progress as well as ongoing discussions about what the next steps are. We have a number of new topics that are up for consideration for this year. There are a lot, and because the nature of the emerging topics is really around finding the right energy and resources to support them, well, we're looking at kind of crowdsourcing the idea of which projects we're going to pursue. So these are the topics that are on the agenda for brief discussion, and then the group at the meeting is going to self-select which projects there are sufficient participants for, attendees for, as well as which projects actually have people willing to step up and be leaders of them. And leaders in many ways are just what you'd expect it to be, making sure the ball moves forward as details of the project get developed. So the topics that are on the list for consideration at the meeting are around statistical computing environments, a definition of what that is, what the boundaries are, what other supportive technologies need to be considered as part of a statistical computing environment, but might be a bit different than the environment itself. Data visualizations, we certainly know that graphs and other ways of visualizing data are a big part of clinical research, but the goal of this group will be to try to establish what the best approach is for developing visualizations, what the expectations are, not necessarily picking a language or a tool, but how to provide those visualizations in a positive, constructive way. A framework for mobile health, a lot of activity anyway has been going on around mobile activity trackers, fitness trackers, other ways of collecting mobile health data, where and how those fit into clinical research is very much an emerging topic. The use of text analytics in clinical research, being able to explore and analyze free text field that's captured as part of the clinical research process, and then use that data, use that information directly, even though it starts out as very unstructured, and the implications for that in the clinical research process. And the last topic under consideration is around big data. There's certainly no shortage of discussion around big data. I think it's fair to say that the clinical research industries are looking at this maybe a little bit differently. It's not financial data or banking data. It's very focused on clinical research, and a lot of times big data doesn't necessarily impact the day-to-day activities around clinical trials, but it could, and that's where a lot of the discussion has been. So those are the 6 topics, or the 5 new topics that are up for consideration for the meeting. And like I said, when we get to the meeting, we'll have a way of self-selecting and determining which ones we want to pursue for 2015, in addition to the 2 others around data management and cloud. And we'll go from there. So the meeting tends to start out a little bit free form, at least from the emerging technologies perspective, and then get a little more focused, like emerging technologies in general. And importantly, we need the participants of the meeting to come ready to contribute, but to be flexible and understand that if you've got a topic that you're interested in, it may not be the one that's selected based upon the interest of the attendees there at the time. We certainly need folks to lead these groups. We need motivated people to step up and participate. And there are broader descriptions of the topics I mentioned available on the website posted here. So I look forward to seeing everybody at the meeting, being able to talk about the two projects, projects we have and the projects that we're going to identify, and really moving the ball forward and crystallizing some of these ideas that we talk about and actually making them real and practical for industry.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that summary, and I think there's some exciting things to talk about in that area. Could you right-click on my name and make me presenter?
Working on it, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to our Optimizing the Use of Data Standards group. DJ Chatterjee from Booz & Allen in Hamilton, and just recently took over as one of the co-leads of this group and has done a great job at getting it organized and working with the steering committee as well as the CDISC in aligning some of the projects here and moving them forward. So I'll hand it off to you, DJ. Let me make you presenter and have you come off mute, and I'll hand it off to you.
Okay. Chris, do you see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, for the intro. As he mentioned, I've recently taken a position to help out on the Optimizing Use of Data Standards Working Group, in addition to Jeff Conant, who's been around, and he's also helping to facilitate. And I think the main mission of this group is to identify gaps that prevent both FDA and industry from optimizing the use of data standards and then collaborating to start closing those gaps. And it's a very large, winded approach, but I think it's in a very important, significant piece of work. So this is just to give an overview of the 2014 leadership team. So we have two FDA liaisons, Steve Wilson and Jingyi Ku from CEDAR. We have a variety of project leads. A few of them are going to be moving on to other working groups, and so we will have sort of new faces taking some of these positions, and we're obviously looking to get some help from the attendees this year, who are, as everyone else has mentioned, motivated and have a strong passion at making a change, not just for an individual company, but across the industry. So these are the three current projects that we have going on. The first is around traceability and data flow. And this is really touching on the fact that traceability challenges come up during the data flow process, especially when you're talking about raw study level data being converted to SDTM. And so the group is really working on discussing and defining traceability considerations, not just at a study site, a study level, but also when you talk about integrated data sets. And then the different data flow scenarios that arise. The second group is the best practices for data standards implementation. So it's really a core group of people that work together to develop a recommended set of best practices in order to optimize the implementation of standards. So as Chris mentioned, CDISC is the SDO that develops the standards. And so we are helping to implement those standards by identifying gaps and addressing them. And the third project that we have going on is the Study Data Standardization Plan, or the SDSP. It was a big component of the recent FDA guidance. And as per that guidance, the FDA really wants the development of the SDSP to be submitted to them early in the development cycle to help optimize the implementation of standards. So I'll go into some of these into a little bit more detail around the specifics and what we hope to accomplish for these three projects at the 2015 CSS. So for the first team, the traceability and data flow, there have been a few different very important pieces finished. So there's a study level traceability and a nonlinear data flow document. There's the best practices for basic linear data flow, some updates made, some more updates around the summary of traceability references. There's work being done now on the legacy data conversion plan template, which is again mentioned in that guidance document. So it's important and everyone needs to do it. And so the hope for this project at the conference is to gather some feedback from attendees on that data conversion plan template, discuss the integration traceability for FDA specific needs, And then there's a new project that has been in coordination with the CDISC ADAM leadership team around documenting the analysis data process flow, because that's, again, that's just as important from the end regulatory perspective. The second group is the best practices group, and so there have been actually 3 different sort of papers or reports completed. One is around visit number for unplanned visits and assigning epoch to observations. The second is around standardizing lab units. And the third is around ensuring use subject ID is unique within an application. And so the goal for this group is to really work with the SDSP team around a potential test unit plan integration and what that looks like, and is it part of the SDSP or not. It's also to gather comments from the attendees on the 2 papers that were recently or are in the process of being completed, and then determine next project ideas. So one of the big aspects is around labs. And so what some of the ideas that had been floating around throughout the year has been around rounding and significant digits, how to collect units on CRFs, different reference range standardization. So do you take the percentage or the actual absolute value? So there's a lot of potential, and so there's going to be a need for the attendees to really step up and be involved with where this group really ends up going. And the third group is around the SDSP, so the standardization plan. So the team is working very hard, especially around, since the final guidance was released, in developing a draft template. And so that hopefully will be published and put on the wiki before the conference so that attendees have a chance to look at it, so that when we actually get to the 2015 CSS, we can gather some really important feedback on the template. We also want to work on the sample cover letter, again, which mentioned explicitly in the guidance to accompany the SDSP. They're going to work with, as I mentioned before, the lab units test team around the test unit plan, and then identify a plan for the post-CSS deliverables. So what are the next steps? So for example, completion guidelines, coming up with a tangible example for the SDSP, and so on. So in addition to these 3 projects, we have some exploratory projects, as Chris mentioned, that we want to start at the conference. So the first is around an open roundtable on the FDA guidance. So as Chris mentioned, the guidance came out on December 17th by FDA, the parent guidance and the individual guidance. And so what we want to do is have a roundtable discussion during that lunchtime breakout on what tools and processes industry needs to know in order to best implement the guidance. So for example, we know that there's the SDSP that FDA wants to see, and so that project is going on. But are there other elements of that industry needs some better explanation or clarification on? Something like a data standards checklist. So the idea is on that first day during the lunchtime, lunch starts at 12, so you'll have some time to eat, and then we're holding an hour to have this type of a breakout session where we'll have folks, we'll have facilitators breaking out into different groups, and just having a discussion on some aspects that we've pre-identified, and come up with thoughts around what are the key or important aspects. And so the core team will then sort of aggregate that data and that information, and we'll have a more focused discussion on day 2 around some of the common issues or some of the common points that were raised, as well as potential next steps. The second project that we're thinking about is around the Therapeutic Area User Guide, or TAUG, e-share metadata requirements. So we've been working, as Chris mentioned, closely with CDISC, and they're very interested in getting a better sense or better understanding of industry's requirements on the TAUG metadata bundles. So one of those bundles, or one of those therapeutic areas, is around asthma. And so what CDISC really wants to gather is information and perspectives on not just the content, but around data governance. So there's 2 different aspects. There's the technical side, and then there's more of the content side. And asthma is the example here because CDISC really is going to use the structure of that metadata bundle for all future metadata bundles for different therapeutic areas. And so what they want to do is make sure that this first bundle is matching the needs of the people using it. And so that's still in discussion around when we're going to have it. We're going to have one group. It's going to be facilitated by Sam Hume from CDISC, who leads the eShare, and it's going to look like a roundtable discussion again. we're trying to get some integration with potentially another group around the technical aspects of it, and so you'll see that in the updates. But so these are the two exploratory projects. Obviously, these are not all-encompassing. We are looking for more ideas around what people are interested in, and so just to give everyone a sort of view of what has been accomplished, we've got one poster in that 35 number that Chris mentioned around use subject ID. We've either completed or updated 7 different white papers and documents. And we actually had someone from the best practice team give a webinar, a CDISC webinar on this use subject ID topic. So it's an important thing. You're not limited to PhUSE. I mean, it is all-encompassing in terms of the industry. And so, if you're interested in learning more, we have a link to the wiki site. You can email our list box. And I really look forward to making this a very effective group and really be able to address all the issues that industry has around how to best implement the data standards. So Chris, I'm going to give it back to you.
Thank you, DJ. Yeah, give it back to me. I appreciate the overview there. I'm going to show my screen. Thank you, DJ. So now I'm going to move on to the Semantic Technology Working Group. So Frederick Malfait is going to give us an overview of that. Frederick, again, has been involved in this initiative from the beginning and has delivered a lot of exceptional work through this, originally through the emerging technologies and then eventually through this new group, the Semantic Technologies Group. So I'll hand it over to you, Frederick. I'll make you presenter.
So as Chris said, this is a group that is fairly young. So I think we've been on the road now for about 2 years. I thank my colleagues Scott, Jeff, and Mitra for contributing a lot of the work in this group, and the co-leads or the team leads of the different project teams also for providing input for this presentation. The objective of the working group, as stated from the start, is to investigate how we can put semantic standards to use to support the full data lifecycle of the clinical processes from protocol to submission. And basically, the idea or the background of that is CDISC is publishing a lot of data standards, but we still have also a lot of problems with those. We're actually implementing those in companies and putting these standards to use in processes and use them to automate things. Part of the problem is that some of the standards are isolated and not connected. Another problem is that standards are published on paper, PDF, in spreadsheets, etc., which makes it difficult to automatically process these standards. And that's where semantic standards can come into play to solve these kind of problems. So that means to formalize these standards, to make them computable and computer processable, and to make sure that we can interlink these standards together. So that's where the W3C semantic standards come into play. So they have, let's call it the language resource description framework that you can use to model things. So we can model these standards, that metadata. But the nice thing about RDF is that these models are actually executable on computer systems, so you can populate these models with actual data and then start using that information to automate processes. So that's what RDF does for us. Most of the things that this is about is data standards, so there's a lot of metadata involved. So another thing that we included right from the start is the key pieces of ISO 11179, which is an industry standard around metadata. And obviously, once we get to the subject matter, everything is around the CDISC standards as our clinical trial data standards. So we're combining all of these things basically in one package, so that with that we hope that we can make all those CDISC clinical trial data standards basically computable. We have a number of different projects running, and I have a slide on each of those, except for the key CRF. That will be that's about linking the EHR world with the CDASH world and using RDF in that process. That project team is closing out now, and I think we will be wrapping up before the CSS, and maybe at the CSS give an update, but we're not sure yet. Apart from that, we have one project about which we will definitely give an update, and then we will have 3 breakout sessions within the Semantic Technology Working Group. So the first one, this is more of an update, is work that has been done or completed in 2014, where the mission basically was to take the foundational CD standards, C-SDM, Send, and Atom, and to create RDF models to represent all of these models in RDF and link these models together, including their control terminology. So that RDF work has been done and been published on GitHub. And in addition, we've created a user guide and a reviewer guide written in the CDISC template of the CDISC documentation. It has gone through CDISC internal review, and it has been published by CDISC and opened for public review, which is, I think, going to close this week. So if you want to go for public review of this thing, I recommend you go to the CDISC website, and you're going to find the link there to find these materials. But I think it's going to close out this week. So we don't going to have a separate breakout on this at the CSS, but we will give you an update. We will still have to evaluate what further activities we're going to do in 2015 around this, because basically the work has been done. We definitely need to look at the feedback from the public review and maybe update a few things. And then I think the exciting thing to look at this year is that SHARE has formally defined as a SHARE Release 2 requirement to create an export format for RDF for SHARE content. So since C-SDM and these other standards are in SHARE today, since we have done these RDF models, so it's going to be a case now to work with the SHARE team to see how the export is going to look like, how close it can be to the models we've already produced, and then if CDISC wishes so to support the SHARE team to make sure that we can get that export in RDF out this year. So we will give hopefully a more detailed status update about that at the CSS. Then the first breakout team that we have is around the protocol and study design in RDF. So my colleague there is Jeff Lowe from Medidata. The goal that we have there for this year is going to be building on the work from last year, where we've essentially taken the SDM XML standard from CDISC, which very well describes the model around the schedule of activities, and we've basically mapped and refined that to make a more formal model in RDF of that, and also tested it out with actual example studies to populate these models and do things with that. So we're going to make that ready for publication, create documentation around that, and then definitely also feedback to CDISC, and see how we can maybe work with the XML teams within CDISC to discuss some of the gaps that we found and exchange information around that. We also want to stepwise extend that model to go deeper on the protocol side. That means we will be looking at things like endpoints, eligibility criteria, things like that, and see how we can add those to the model. And then thirdly, I think we have quite an exciting opportunity with the Transcelerate Common Protocol template team. So these people have finished a first draft of a human-readable protocol template that they will probably bring out this year. And they're now looking at defining a number of POCs around that template to show once the value that you can get when you have a digital protocol. So that's where the RDF model of the schedule of activities can come into play, and we have submitted on the Transcelerate team one POC that with our PhUSE team we hope to participate in and leverage our connection with the Transcelerate team. For the breakout topics, we have a list here, so we want to avoid that. I think Jeff did a great job in last year to talk the whole team through the schedule of activities, but I think it's maybe more interesting that we now have more separate topics. So we'll definitely have a general introduction where we give an overview of the work that has already been done, probably a walkthrough of that schedule of activity model. And then we're going to have discussion rounds around eligibility criteria, endpoints, outcomes, objectives. We will definitely going to talk about the transfer rate CPT activities, and then there is another topic around alignment with other PhUSE groups. So there is a separate thread within PhUSE called end-to-end, where we are looking at how can we leverage RDF to cross the different topics that the different groups are looking at. The second breakout team will be around analysis results metadata in RDF. That's being led by Mark Anderson and Ian Fleming. Whereas the previous group is more looking at formal modeling, I think this group is more geeky. So we have Mark and Ian, who are statisticians, I think, at heart. And so they're all about calculating things and doing things with number and combining that with metadata. So the idea is how can we take analysis results and combine that with the metadata so that it becomes self-describing, and how can we represent that in a formal model in RDF. W3C has, interestingly, published a standard around that, which is called the RDF Data Cube, and that's definitely one of the things that this group is looking at to see how far that standard can help us to represent those analysis results and their metadata. In terms of work packages, they're going to look at producing code as an R package, which then can connect to such an RDF model so that you can start actually doing calculations within that R package with that. We will need an RDF ontology for that, maybe based on RDF Data Cube or an extension of that RDF Data Cube. And then finally, they're going to publish a white paper that sums everything up. In terms of breakout topics, there's going to be discussions about the rationale for why using the W3C RDF Data Cube, advantages, disadvantages, etc. They're going to talk about the workflow as you go from ADAM datasets to TFLs to results, and how that works in RDF. Graphical representations of RDF. RDF as a model is sometimes hard to look at, so one burning question is always like, okay, it's a good thing to have things in RDF, but how do you visualize these things to the user? I already talked about the R package. That's definitely a breakout topic. And then they're probably going to discuss how they are going to set up the white paper and what kind of things they want to present in that white paper. The third group, and that's might become the highlight of the year. I think this is a very exciting opportunity. So we have Laszlo Vasco and Mary Banach. Laszlo did a very interesting presentation at the November CDISC Interchange about clinical program design. So they have been looking at what kind of tool sets would be interesting to have around when you work in the area of clinical program design. So what you would like to do is when you take decisions in that area is that they're not just written on paper or passed on in emails, that they can actually be formally modeled and documented so that they can be used for automation or be used as input for tools that people can work with. So after that presentation, we had a follow-up conversation, also including BenQ, because it was suggested that maybe the RDF group here would be a good place to start on this work. There has been already, I think, quite a lot of pre-work done by Laszlo in other contexts, and so we're not starting from scratch. And they have also a lot of connections to people who are the subject matter experts in this area. Next week, early next week, I think, is the very first kickoff TC, and I think there's about 40 people that have registered to be interested either to work in this team or to work as reviewers of the materials that will come out of this group. And the CSS is basically going to be the kickoff of this team. So I think this is really a very interesting opportunity. The benefits for these things is going to be obvious. Instead of writing things around the clinical program design on paper, you're going to have a formal model where all of this stuff is available. That's going to facilitate information sharing between stakeholders. It can feed applications. You can link it to agency guidance, and you can share best practices. At the end, a formal agenda for the CSS is not available. I think, as we had with the other teams when they started, there might be quite a bit of brainstorming in the beginning to order the ideas and maybe prioritize them and talk about the deliverables that this team will be doing in 2015. What we do know is that probably the last hours of the conference, we will bring the people from this team together with the people that work on the protocol and study design, because we suspect that there's going to be quite a lot of links in terms of the modeling in the future. So it's been good that these teams will meet up and then have some opportunity to exchange ideas at the end of the conference. And that's it from my side, Chris.
Thank you, Frederick. A lot of really. Well, could you go on mute and then change me?
I'll do that.
Okay. There was a lot of interesting stuff there and exciting kind of new ideas and things. So I'm really interested to see how that group continues to develop and come up with these very innovative ideas. Before I hand it off to Mary Nilsson, I just want to mention everybody on the webinar. If you've got questions, feel free to plug them into the chat window, and they'll get across to us, and we'll ask them near the end. So again, make sure you don't forget them from previous talks, and put those questions in, and we'll try to answer them at the end. So I'm going to now hand it off to you, Mary. Let me make you presenter, and you can come off mute, and hopefully this will work. Okay, I can definitely see your screen.
Okay.
And I can hear your voice, so I will go on mute and let you take over.
Okay. So I'm Mary Nelson. I'm one of the co-leads for the development of standard scripts for analysis and programming working group. And I am presenting on the behalf of a pretty active leadership group. We have several people who are involved and have contributed either as a project lead. We do have Steve Wilson and Matt Sukup as our FDA liaisons. So on behalf of this large group, I guess I'll give you an overview of what we've been doing. So the working group description, the goal is to establish a platform for the collaborative development of program code. And this will include, we first start by trying to recommend what displays or analyses make sense for various purposes, and we do that via the creation of white papers. And then we would create code associated with those recommendations and have a platform for storing such code, and have it be an open platform, so it could also include code associated with these recommendations, but also can store code from various other sources as well. So the goal is to have a platform for sharing code and harness the data standards. Okay, so the vision, hopefully to help with the vision, is we are really focused at the end of the data flow. We're focusing at the display side of things, and there's been a bit of a gap in not having a whole lot of work associated with recommendations on what displays or analyses make sense for different purposes. So we are tackling that particular gap. And then the other part of our vision is then to have a shared repository which everyone can use. And so this is to think in terms of utilizing crowdsourcing for maintaining a reusable code library. So industry may have trouble maintaining their reusable code library. The FDA may struggle. Academia may have code that they want to share, but maybe not have a place to put it that would have visibility. So the idea is to crowdsource the reusable code library. Okay, so we do have 6 active projects, but we really think of them as 3 main buckets. So the script repository work has 4 projects associated with it, but it all relates to getting the script repository, this shared reusable code library, up and running and working. So we did piece it out into smaller chunks just to be able to split up the work, I guess. So we do have a project that did work on the legal considerations, and then the whole project that's really focusing on the qualification steps. Another project looking for scripts that are already out in the public domain that might be worth either pointing to or bringing into the script repository, and then just the logistics of the platform itself. And the other focus area, one other focus area are these white papers I already mentioned. So we have a whole project team and groups working on white papers that actually stop and say, well, what displays should we be creating for different purposes? We can, take advantage of some shared learning. Let's look to see what displays people have used and what seems to work well, and actually recommend. And so we do certainly learn from each other, but we have some recommended displays in these white papers that perhaps nobody has ever produced them. So it's not a matter of looking at what's the most popular display, but actually coming up with perhaps new displays that would be useful in the future. So we kind of really take a hard look at a good way to display data in certain focus areas, in particular safety-related topics. And we do have a project to help with communications. So just to give people an idea of what has already been done, and then we'll get into what still needs to be done and what we will continue to work on. So the script repository has already been created. So it is there. Google Code has been chosen, and we have had 3 scriptathons already, and at the March meeting we'll have our 4th. There are already 27 scripts in the repository with more to come. The legal issues have been tackled already. We have process guidelines, we have qualification guidelines, and we have a user-friendly front end, hopefully. Certainly more can be developed. So here's a snapshot of the front end as it was maybe a few months ago. So you'll see kind of the name of the program, the title of what it does, and the source of, so if a particular program code was written to be associated with one of the recommended white papers, then it will provide a link to that white paper, so it has the source and it has some keywords to make it, as this gets larger, hopefully easy to find something that somebody may be interested in looking for. So on the white papers project team, we have 3 white papers that have been finalized. So one on vital signs, ECGs, and labs, the central tendency portion of that, a PK white paper, and a white paper on demographics, disposition, and medications. And we have another white paper that is almost final, and that's the kind of the other half of vital signs, ECGs, and labs, looking at outliers and shifts. And I guess I should make note, most of these white papers are really trying hard to utilize visualization as well. That seems to be, the hot topic, is trying to visualize your data the best you can. So you'll see a lot of recommended displays in these white papers. You'll see a lot of visualized data. It's not always the case, but we certainly are leaning in that direction. And we also have 4 white papers in progress: an adverse event, hepatotoxicity, thorough QT studies, and questionnaire data. So we're having a pretty good steady flow for these white papers. So a lot of progress has been made, and we have a lot of ideas that are still in progress. So we're kind of probably in the middle of a lot of this white paper work. Okay, for the March meeting, we have planned that for scriptathon, so that's Monday night. This scriptathon for this event will focus on really tidying up the existing scripts. So we have existing scripts out there, but some of them might need to be finished, or maybe they've made a long way but not quite done. So the focus will be to finish those and actually qualify them, because the ones that are out there right now are just at the develop stage. They haven't made it to the qualified stage, and so that will be the focus of this particular scriptathon. And in general, we'll have breakout sessions for this working group, and we'll meet together as a working group for part of the sessions, but we'll also have the white paper group and the script repository group will get together as smaller groups as well. And the qualification process will be the emphasis for this particular event. It's really to fine-tune that process, and we'll learn from the scriptathon of what worked and didn't work, and that process can be refined. When the white paper group gets together as its own breakout session, we will work on some of the, I guess, the more touchy topics that require discussion. The outlier shift paper, white paper, is the one we are trying to finalize pretty quickly. I think the hot topic of that one is going to be whether or not we recommend and how to recommend what's called the cumulative or the adjusted percentage for integrated displays. There's been some recent literature that's been getting some mileage about, for the integrated displays, we should consider not displaying just crude percentages, but display these study-adjusted percentages. And so we're going to talk about that. The adverse event white paper has had one draft that has gone out for public review. So we'll probably take a look at those review comments and talk about some of the hotter topics. So for example, how to define the time period for treatment emergence. Do you or do you not add, days after treatment for determining treatment emergence? And this particular white paper, we are still currently, we have one visual display in the recommendation, so we would certainly consider ideas for additional visual displays. And the cumulative and adjusted percentage topic pertains to adverse events as well. And then the hepatotoxicity and QT studies, neither of those have gone out for public review yet. So we'll probably use some of this breakout session time to let those particular white paper leaders bring up some of the topics that they think would be important to discuss before it goes out for public review. So in general, just to give an idea of where we're at in the whole process is, we are very much at the early stages or middle stages. So we certainly want to continue to build the script repository. We still have a lot of work to do on white papers to keep that study flow continuing. And certainly with communications, we want to really get the word out that these white papers exist, the script repository exists, and hopefully get to the point where people are actually utilizing the recommendations and using some of the code. So where our working group could use the help the most at the moment is the communications project team. Really could use some help maintaining some of the information and just have links to the material that has been presented to keep that up to date. And our white papers group, if you know of a medical writer who would be passionate about helping with some of the white paper work, that would be great. So in general, we just in general help, I guess it's more of a spread the word. Any help we can get to spread the word, and certainly, attend the conference and learn what's out there, read the white papers, and help get some dialogue moving. And then I guess these remaining slides just give instructions on how to join the group, or if you want to know where, all of our final white papers are on the PhUSE homepage, the PhUSE.eu page under publications. You can always see draft white papers on the PhUSE wiki, and here are some links to the actual PhUSE repository. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Mary. Can you go ahead and hand back to me? And thank you for that thorough and good overview. So again, if there's any questions you have, feel free to add them into the chat. There was two questions I had that I'll ask some of our panelists to answer. The first, probably for you, DJ, is around the discussion forum or the roundtable around the guides. Is the expectation that that'll just sort of be a discussion, or will potential projects come out of that activity?
Yeah, so I think the answer is both, right? So the idea of the roundtable is to hear about the issues and ideas that people have in that hour session. And then the core team for the ODS is going to take all of the information that we've gathered, aggregate it, and then come up with a short list of ideas that will then turn into potential projects, right? And so we will then on Tuesday have another session for this, the follow-up, where we will bring up these shortlisted items, have a discussion around, does everyone seem to agree that those are the ideas that we want to address? And then how do we go about doing that, whether it's through a best practice or a document or a checklist, and then actually having a project come out of these ideas.
Okay, thank you. The other question is probably for you, Frederick. There was a question regarding the clinical program project. Whoop. You might. I think you are the culprit. If you could go on mute just till I finish the question. So in the clinical program design project, there was a lot of different things on that in those bullets. Is there any one or two things that are sort of the hot topics in that area that you think the team would focus on first?
I don't have that information yet. As I said, we're gonna have the very first DC kickoff meeting, I think, next Monday. So that's where it's all gonna start. So I will be learning myself about the subject matter. I know a few bits about RDF, but I'm really looking forward to learn about the subject matter myself. I think the meeting on Monday is gonna really be centered around Laszlo presenting some materials, the stuff that he has worked on, and then I think we will learn more from that, and then from there I would expect that at that DC and then definitely during the CSS, I think that the important topics there will then crystallize and being prioritized. So that's all I can say for the moment. So if you want to know more, drop me an email, or we can contact Laszlo or Mary to get you on the TC, or you join at the CSS, and it's really, the whole thing is kicking off right now, so it's really at the very start.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to wrap up, this session today will be recorded, so early next week we'll have this published to the website, and you can share it with colleagues and other people within the industry, as well as the slide decks will be presented as well on the slide deck. In addition, there'll be updates to the PhUSE wiki over the next few weeks, and we'll be sending an email out to attendees. As I mentioned, the few last slots for the conference, and we do have a cap, so please register now before it fills up. So I do have another question that came in, and this is probably a question either for DJ or Sue. Does the operating data or optimizing data standards group look at non-clinical as well, or is the work done by the operating data standards assessed in the non-clinical group? So maybe, I guess, Sue, since you've been around longer, maybe you can talk about some of the work we've tried to do with sort of cross-pollination of working groups.
Sure. That's not a cut on how old I am, is it?
Not at all.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, I quickly scribble in a note. I think that's a terrific opportunity for us to collaborate across working groups, and we try to do that as much as we can. And we have worked with the Optimizing Data Standards group in the past. In fact, our Study Data Reviewer's Guide for Non-Clinical came out of a project that they did that we used as a template. So yes, for sure, there's lots of opportunity to look at that.
Okay, thank you. And that's one of the responsibilities of the steering committee as well, to make sure that there is communication going on between the groups and not overlap of activities. So, well,
so what I would also add to that, just is that in webinars like this, when people ask questions like that, it's a great way to trigger a, hey, look over there, and we really appreciate it.
Yep. So if there's no further questions, then I'll wrap up the webinar today. And as I mentioned, the recording will be available next week to share with colleagues. There'll be more information coming out to attendees. And I encourage you to get involved if you're not already. There's a lot of neat stuff going on within and across the working groups. So thank you for our panelists. Thank you to our panelists and our attendees today, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Chris.